It was early in the morning, and the air at the small private airfield outside of Denver felt cool and fresh. The sun had just started to rise, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. People were already gathering around the hangars, buzzing with excitement for the day's flight demonstration. Among them stood Laura Carter, a young woman whose presence seemed to draw attention, not entirely because of her interest in aviation, but because of how she chose to dress. Laura wore a short dress that day, one that showed off her confidence, more than anything else. It wasn't exactly what most people expected to see at an event like this, where attendees usually dressed casually yet practically in jeans or khakis. Her outfit made some heads turn, though not always for positive reasons. Some whispered about her choice of clothing, while others simply raised their eyebrows and moved on. But Laura didn't care much for what others thought. She came to watch planes take off and soar into the sky, something she had always loved, since childhood. Her love for airplanes came from her father, who used to be a Navy pilot. Growing up, he would tell her stories about flying over oceans and mountains, describing the thrill of being high above the world. He even taught her the basics of aviation when she was younger, letting her sit in cockpits during air shows and explaining how controls worked. Those memories stayed with her, even as life took her down different paths. Now, as an adult, Laura still found joy in watching planes zip through the air, feeling a connection to her father every time she did. She wandered closer to the hangar area. Laura noticed a man standing near one of the aircraft. He looked serious, his posture straight and commanding. This was Marcus Hill, a well-respected pilot known for his skill and professionalism. Marcus had spent years flying commercial jets, earning admiration from colleagues and passengers alike. Today, however, he wasn't piloting a passenger plane. He was here to showcase his expertise in smaller aircraft during the demonstration. Marcus scanned the crowd, ensuring everything was in order before the show began. His eyes landed on Laura, almost immediately. At first glance, he saw someone who didn't quite fit in. Her short dress seemed out of place among the practical attire of other spectators. To him, it felt like a distraction, a disruption to the seriousness of the event. He frowned slightly, wondering why someone would come dressed so casually or provocatively to such a setting. Deciding to address the situation, Marcus walked over to Laura. His steps were measured, his expression calm but firm. "Excuse me," he said, his voice steady. Laura turned to face him, surprised by the interruption. Up close, she could see that Marcus carried himself with authority, his dark skin contrasting sharply against the bright colors of the morning sky behind him. "Yes?" Laura replied, tilting her head slightly. Her tone was polite but curious. "I'm sorry," Marcus continued, "but I need to ask you to leave." Laura blinked, caught off guard by the request. "Leave? Why?" "This is a professional event," Marcus explained, gesturing vaguely toward her outfit. "Your attire. It doesn't align with the standards we expect here." Laura felt heat rise to her cheeks. Was he really asking her to leave because of what she was wearing? She glanced down at her dress, then back up at Marcus. "Are you serious right now?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Marcus nodded, his expression unchanging. "I am. This isn't personal. It's about maintaining respect for the environment and the people participating in this demonstration." The words stung. Laura clenched her fists briefly, trying to keep her composure. "So, you're saying I don't belong here because of how I look?" she shot back, her voice rising slightly. "That's ridiculous." "I'm not judging you based on looks," Marcus countered, though his tone remained calm. "I'm asking you to consider the context. This isn't a fashion show, it's a place where people come to appreciate aviation seriously." Laura opened her mouth to argue further but stopped herself. What was the point? No matter what she said, it seemed clear that Marcus had already made up his mind. Instead, she let out a frustrated sigh and muttered, "Fine. Whatever." Security personnel nearby stepped forward, ready to escort her away if necessary. Laura held up a hand, signaling that she wouldn't cause trouble. "I'll go," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Wouldn't want to ruin your precious, professional atmosphere." As she walked away, Laura couldn't help but feel angry, not just at Marcus, but at the entire situation. Who was he to decide whether or not she belonged there? Sure, maybe her outfit wasn't typical for an aviation event, but that didn't mean she didn't deserve to be there. After all, she knew more about planes than most of the people gawking at her probably did. Once she was far enough away from the hangar, Laura paused and looked back. She watched as Marcus returned to his duties, seemingly unfazed by their encounter. For a moment she considered leaving altogether, heading home and forgetting about the whole thing. But something inside her refused to give up so easily. If Marcus thought she didn't belong, then she'd prove him wrong. And not just him, everyone who doubted her. Later that evening, sitting alone in her apartment, Laura replayed the incident. In her mind, the anger hadn't faded. If anything, it had grown stronger. She remembered the way Marcus had spoken to her, the condescending tone in his voice. It wasn't just about the dress, it was about the assumption that she didn't know anything about aviation simply because of how she looked. But Laura did know. She knew more than most people realized. Her father had taught her everything about planes, their mechanics, their history, their capabilities. She may not have pursued aviation professionally, but she had spent countless hours practicing on simulators and studying manuals. Hell, she even had a private pilot's license tucked away somewhere, earned after months of dedication and hard work. An idea began to form in her mind, vague at first but growing clearer with each passing second. If Marcus wanted professionalism, then she'd give him professionalism. She'd show him and everyone else that she wasn't just some random woman in a short dress. She was someone who could hold her own in the world of aviation no matter what anyone thought. The next morning, Laura reached out to an old friend named Alex Bennett. Alex worked as a mechanic at a nearby military base, someone she had met years ago through mutual acquaintances. They weren't particularly close, but Alex owed her a favor and Laura intended to call it in. "Hey, Alex," she said when he answered the phone. "I need your help with something." Alex sounded cautious. "What kind of something?" "I need access to a simulator," Laura explained, cutting straight to the point, "preferably one for fighter jets." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "You're joking, right?" "Nope," Laura replied firmly. "And before you say no, remember, you owe me." Alex sighed heavily. "This is going to get me in trouble, isn't it?" "Probably," Laura admitted. "But trust me, it'll be worth it." After some persuasion, Alex reluctantly agreed to help. That night, under the cover of darkness, Laura slipped onto the base with his guidance. Together, they made their way to the simulator room, a space filled with advanced equipment designed to mimic real-world flight scenarios. As soon as Laura sat down in front of the controls, she felt a surge of determination. This was her chance to prove herself, not just to Marcus, but to the entire aviation community. For hours, she practiced tirelessly, running through drills and honing her skills. Each session brought her closer to mastering the art of flying, pushing her limits until she felt confident enough to take on even the best pilots. By the time dawn broke, exhaustion weighed heavily on her body, but her resolve had never been stronger. Little did she know this was only the beginning of her journey. The days following Laura's ejection from the airfield were a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, frustration, and determination swirled inside her like a storm that refused to settle. Every time she thought about Marcus and his dismissive attitude, her blood boiled. But instead of letting those feelings consume her, Laura channeled them into action. She was determined to prove herself, not just to Marcus, but to everyone who had doubted her. Laura spent most of her time in the simulator room at the military base, thanks to Alex's reluctant assistance. The simulator itself was an impressive piece of technology, designed to replicate the experience of flying advanced aircraft, including fighter jets like the F-35. It featured a cockpit surrounded by screens that displayed realistic visuals of the sky, complete with weather conditions, enemy planes, and even battlefield scenarios. For someone like Laura, who had always dreamed of soaring through the clouds, it felt almost magical. At first, operating the simulator wasn't easy. Fighter jets were far more complex than the small training planes she'd flown during her private pilot lessons. Their controls were sensitive, requiring precision and quick reflexes. The sheer number of buttons, switches, and levers could overwhelm even experienced pilots. But Laura didn't let that stop her. She approached the challenge with relentless focus, determined to master every aspect of the machine. Each night, after sneaking onto the base with Alex's help, Laura would sit in the cockpit and run through countless drills. She started with basic maneuvers, taking off, climbing, turning, and landing. Once she grew comfortable with those, she moved on to more complicated tasks, like aerial combat simulations and evasive maneuvers. The simulator provided feedback, after each session, grading her performance based on accuracy, speed, and efficiency. At first, her scores were low, but Laura didn't care. She knew improvement took time, and she was willing to put in the effort. What surprised Alex the most was how quickly Laura adapted. He had agreed to help her out of obligation, expecting her enthusiasm to fade after a few frustrating attempts. But Laura was different. She stayed late into the night, sometimes until sunrise, practicing over and over again without complaint. Her hands moved confidently across the controls, her eyes glued to the screens as she navigated virtual skies filled with challenges. One evening, while reviewing her progress, Alex couldn't help but express his admiration. "You're really serious about this, aren't you?" he asked, leaning against the wall as Laura adjusted the settings for another simulation. "Dead serious," Laura replied without looking up. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, inputting new parameters for the next drill. Alex shook his head, half amused and half impressed. "I've seen trained pilots struggle with this stuff, and here you are picking it up like it's nothing." "It's not nothing," Laura corrected him, finally glancing in his direction. "It's hard, really hard, but I'm not giving up." Her determination inspired Alex to offer more help than he initially intended. He began teaching her technical details about the aircraft, explaining how engines worked, how radar systems detected threats, and how missiles locked onto targets. Laura soaked up the information eagerly, asking questions whenever something didn't make sense. Together, they transformed the simulator room into a makeshift classroom, where theory met practice in the most unconventional way. As the nights passed, Laura's confidence grew. She no longer hesitated before executing tricky maneuvers or dodging simulated enemy fire. Her reaction times improved and her movements became smoother and more precise. The simulator's feedback reflected her progress, with higher scores appearing after each session. By the end of the second week, Laura could navigate even the toughest scenarios with ease, but mastering the simulator wasn't enough. Laura wanted to take things further, to step out of the virtual world and into reality. She knew that proving herself meant doing something bold, something unforgettable. That's when she learned about an upcoming training exercise involving real F-35s at a restricted airbase nearby. The news came from Alex, who overheard some mechanics talking about it during their shifts. According to them, several pilots, including Marcus, would participate in the exercise, practicing dogfights and other tactical maneuvers. The idea sparked something in Laura, a mix of excitement and recklessness that she couldn't ignore. "You're crazy if you think I'm helping you with that," Alex said flatly when Laura shared her plan. They were sitting in the break room sipping coffee during one of their rare breaks. "I'm not asking you to do anything illegal," Laura countered, though her tone suggested otherwise. "Just tell me where the planes will be parked and when. The exercise is happening, that's all." Alex groaned, rubbing his temples. "Do you have any idea what kind of trouble you'll get into? These aren't toys, Laura. They're military-grade jets. People go to prison for messing with them." "I'm not going to mess with them," Laura insisted. "I'm just borrowing one, temporarily." "Temporarily," Alex repeated, incredulous. "You can't temporarily steal a fighter jet." "I'm not stealing it," Laura snapped. "I'm proving a point to Marcus, to everyone." Alex stared at her, torn between frustration and curiosity. "And what exactly is this point supposed to be?" "That I belong in the sky," Laura said firmly. "That I'm just as good as anyone else, no matter what I wear or how I look." For a moment, Alex didn't say anything. He simply watched as Laura's expression hardened, her resolve shining through. Finally, he sighed and leaned back in his chair. If you get caught, and you will, it's not my fault. Got it? Laura grinned, relief washing over her. Got it. With Alex's reluctant agreement, Laura began planning her next move. She memorized the layout of the airbase, studying maps and blueprints to identify potential entry points. She also researched the security protocols, learning patrol schedules and camera blind spots. It was risky, but Laura thrived under pressure. The thought of pulling off such an audacious stunt only fueled her determination. In the meantime, word of Laura's activities spread quietly through the aviation community. Rumors circulated about a mysterious woman spending hours in a flight simulator, honing skills that rivaled those of professional pilots. Some dismissed the stories as exaggerations, while others dismissed her entirely, assuming she was just another attention seeker. Marcus, however, remained oblivious to the gossip. His focus was entirely on the upcoming training exercise, unaware that Laura was preparing to crash his world, literally. On the eve of the exercise, Laura stood outside the military base, hidden in the shadows of nearby trees. She wore dark clothing to blend in with the night, her heart pounding with anticipation. Beside her lay a duffel bag containing tools Alex had reluctantly provided, along with a handwritten note detailing emergency procedures in case something went wrong. Taking a deep breath, Laura reminded herself why she was doing this. It wasn't just about revenge or proving Marcus wrong. It was about showing the world that talent mattered more than appearances, that passion and dedication could overcome prejudice. With that thought in mind, she stepped forward, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Little did she know the events of the next day would change everything, for better or worse. The night was cold and quiet, the kind of silence that made every sound echo. Laura moved carefully through the shadows, sticking close to the trees and bushes surrounding the restricted airbase. Her heart raced with every step she took, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had spent days preparing for this moment, studying maps, memorizing schedules, and rehearsing her plan over and over in her mind. Now it was time to put all of that preparation to the test. Laura reached the fence that marked the boundary of the base. It was tall, topped with barbed wire, and equipped with cameras that scanned the area constantly. But she had done her homework. Alex had told her about a blind spot near the southwestern corner where the cameras didn't quite reach. Laura crouched low, moving silently toward the spot. When she arrived, she pulled out a pair of wire cutters from her duffel bag and began cutting through the chain-link fence. The sound of metal snapping was soft but sharp in the stillness of the night. She worked quickly, creating a gap just wide enough for her to slip through. Once inside, Laura stayed low, keeping to the shadows as she made her way deeper into the base. She avoided the main roads, sticking to the edges of buildings and using parked trucks and equipment as cover. Every so often she paused to check her surroundings, making sure no guards were nearby. Her pulse thudded in her ears, but she pushed forward, reminding herself why she was doing this. This wasn't just about proving Marcus wrong, it was about showing everyone that she belonged in the sky. After what felt like hours, Laura finally reached the hangar where the F-35s were stored. The sleek fighter jets sat in neat rows, their dark shapes barely visible in the dim light. Laura's breath caught in her throat as she approached one of the planes. Up close, it looked even more impressive than she had imagined, powerful, precise, and intimidating. She ran her hand along, its smooth surface feeling a mix of awe and determination. Laura opened her duffel bag and pulled out the tools Alex had given her. She knew exactly what she needed to do. The first step was disabling the plane's security system, which would prevent alarms from going off when she started the engine. Alex had explained how to bypass the system using a small device he called a key fob. Laura attached the device to a panel on the side of the jet and waited for the green light that signaled success. When it blinked on, she let out a quiet sigh of relief. Next came the hardest part, starting the engine. Fighter jets weren't like regular planes. They required specific sequences of button presses and switches to activate. Laura climbed into the cockpit her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the controls. She went through the checklist Alex had written down for her, double-checking each step before moving on to the next. Finally, she pressed the ignition button. For a moment, nothing happened. Laura's stomach dropped, fear gripping her chest. Had she made a mistake? Was the security system still active? Then, with a low rumble, the engine roared to life. The sound was deafening, but Laura couldn't help smiling. She had done it. She was inside an F-35 ready to take off. Before leaving, Laura activated the jet's stealth mode, a feature that made it nearly invisible to radar. This would buy her some time before anyone realized what was happening. With her hands steady, on the controls, she taxied the plane out of the hangar and onto the runway. The wheels rumbled against the pavement as she accelerated, the force pressing her back into the seat. And then, with a surge of power, the F-35 lifted off the ground, climbing higher and higher into the night sky. As the airbase disappeared beneath her, Laura felt a rush of exhilaration. She had dreamed of flying like this for years, and now she was doing it, not in a simulator, but in a real fighter jet. The world stretched out below her, vast and endless, and for a moment she forgot about everything else. But reality soon returned. She had a mission to complete, and she couldn't afford to lose focus. Laura headed straight for the training zone, where Marcus and the other pilots were conducting their exercises. By now, they would have noticed the missing jet and sounded the alarm. Laura knew she wouldn't have much time before they figured out what was going on. Still, she was ready. She had practiced countless scenarios in the simulator, preparing for this exact moment. When she entered the training zone, chaos erupted. The pilots were already in the air, practicing dogfights and tactical maneuvers. At first, they didn't notice the rogue F-35 weaving through their formations, but when they did, confusion turned to panic. Radios crackled with frantic voices as the pilots tried to figure out who or what was invading their airspace. Marcus was among them, leading the group in a series of coordinated drills. He heard the commotion over the radio and immediately scanned the sky, searching for the intruder. His eyes widened when he spotted the F-35 darting between his teammates with ease. Whoever was flying it was skilled, too skilled to be an amateur hacker or a foreign spy. Something about the jet's movements felt familiar, almost personal. Then the radio came alive again, this time with a voice Marcus recognized instantly. "Surprised to see me?" Laura taunted, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Let's see how good you really are." Marcus froze for a split second, disbelief washing over him. It couldn't be her, could it? The woman he had thrown out of the airfield days ago was now flying one of the most advanced fighter jets in the world, and she was challenging him to a dogfight. "What the hell are you doing?" Marcus demanded, his voice sharp with anger. "You're in serious trouble, Laura." "Trouble?" Laura replied, her voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I'm just having a little fun. Thought you'd appreciate it." "This isn't a game," Marcus shouted back. "You're putting lives at risk." "I'm not risking anyone," Laura shot back. "I'm here to prove a point, that I belong in the sky, that I'm just as good as you, or better." Marcus clenched his jaw, torn between frustration and admiration. He couldn't deny that Laura's piloting skills were impressive. She flew with precision and confidence, navigating the F-35 as if it were an extension of herself. But her reckless behavior was dangerous, and he couldn't let her get away with it. "Fine," Marcus said finally, his voice firm. "If you want to play, let's play." With that, he broke formation and engaged Laura directly. The two jets danced across the sky, twisting and turning in a high-stakes aerial duel. Marcus pushed himself to the limit, using every trick he knew to outmaneuver Laura. But she matched him move for move, her agility and quick thinking keeping her one step ahead. The dogfight drew the attention of the other pilots, who watched, in stunned silence as the two jets clashed. Some cheered, impressed by the display of skill. Others were horrified, worried about what might happen if things escalated further. But neither Laura nor Marcus paid them any mind. They were locked, in their own world, focused solely on besting each other. For Laura, it was the ultimate test of her abilities. Every twist and turn confirmed what she had always known, that she was meant to fly. For Marcus, it was a humbling experience. Despite his years of experience, he found himself struggling to keep up with Laura's unconventional tactics. She fought like no one he had ever faced before, unpredictable yet calculated. As the minutes ticked by, both pilots grew weary, their energy waning under the strain of the intense battle, but neither was willing to back down. They continued to push themselves harder, determined to emerge victorious. The sky around them became a blur of motion, the roar of engines filling the air. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Laura decided to end the fight. She executed a daring maneuver, spinning the F-35 in a tight loop before breaking away and heading back toward the airbase. Marcus followed close behind, unwilling to let her escape without consequences. When Laura landed the jet safely on the runway, she was greeted by a swarm of security personnel and angry officials. Handcuffs clicked around her wrists as she stepped out of the cockpit, her face flushed with triumph and exhaustion. Marcus approached her, his expression a mix of anger and grudging respect. "You're insane," he said, shaking his head. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I proved my point," Laura replied simply, "and maybe taught you something in the process." Marcus didn't respond right away. Instead, he stared at her, realizing that she had earned his respect, not because of her actions, but because of her undeniable talent. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: Laura Carter was a force to be reckoned with. Laura stood on the tarmac, her hands cuffed behind her back, surrounded by a crowd of military personnel and officials. The air was thick with tension as people shouted questions and orders, their voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony. Laura didn't flinch. Her chest rose and fell with steady breaths, her eyes fixed firmly ahead. She had known this moment would come, but she wasn't afraid. If anything, she felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Marcus stood nearby, watching her closely. His arms were crossed over his chest, his expression unreadable. He had followed her down to the ground after the dogfight, his mind racing with conflicting emotions. Anger still simmered beneath the surface. He couldn't ignore the danger she had put herself and others in. But there was also something else. Respect. Reluctant and unwelcome, but undeniable all the same. One of the commanding officers stepped forward, his face red with fury. "What were you thinking?" he barked at Laura, his voice cutting through the noise. "You stole an F-35, a multi-million-dollar piece of military equipment, and flew it without authorization. Do you have any idea how serious this is?" Laura met his gaze without hesitation. "I knew exactly what I was doing," she replied calmly. "And I brought it back in one piece." The officer's jaw tightened. "That doesn't change the fact that you broke multiple laws and endangered lives." "I didn't endanger anyone," Laura shot back. "I flew responsibly. I stayed within safe parameters. And if you're honest, you'll admit I handled that jet better than most of your pilots could." Her words sparked murmurs among the crowd. Some nodded reluctantly, impressed, despite themselves. Others shook their heads, unwilling to condone her reckless behavior. Marcus, however, remained silent. He wanted to argue with her, to remind her of the risks she had taken. But deep down, he couldn't deny her skill. Laura had proven herself, in the sky, no matter how unorthodox her methods. Before the argument could escalate further, another figure emerged from the group. It was General Hayes, a stern-looking man with silver hair and a reputation for fairness. He surveyed the scene with sharp eyes before addressing Laura directly. "Miss Carter," he said, his tone measured but firm. "Your actions today were highly irregular. However, they've also drawn attention, both positive and negative. Tell me, why did you do it?" Laura hesitated for a moment, surprised by the question. She hadn't expected anyone to ask for her reasoning beyond accusations and reprimands. Taking a deep breath, she spoke. "I did it because I wanted to prove a point," she said. "Not just to him," she glanced briefly at Marcus, "but to everyone who doubted me. People judged me based on my appearance, assuming I didn't belong in aviation. But I grew up around planes. I know them inside and out. I may not look like a typical pilot, but that doesn't mean I'm any less capable." The general studied her for a long moment, his expression thoughtful, Then he turned to Marcus. Is what she says true? Did you dismiss her solely because of how she dressed? Marcus shifted uncomfortably under the scrutiny. Yes, I did, he admitted. At the time, I thought her attire was inappropriate for the event, but after seeing her skills firsthand, I realized I misjudged her. The admission hung in the air, heavy and awkward. Laura raised an eyebrow, almost amused by Marcus's discomfort. For once, he wasn't the confident, authoritative figure she had encountered at the airfield. He looked almost human. General, Hayes sighed deeply, rubbing his temples as though warding off a headache. This situation is unprecedented, he said finally. On one hand, Miss Carter committed a serious offense by stealing a fighter jet. On the other hand, her abilities are undeniable. We can't ignore talent like that. Laura's heart skipped a beat. Was he actually considering giving her a chance? She dared to hope, even as she braced herself for whatever punishment awaited her. After a brief pause, the general continued. Miss Carter, you will face legal consequences for your actions. That is non-negotiable. However, he paused again, glancing at Marcus and then back at Laura. Given your exceptional piloting skills, we are willing to offer you an opportunity. You will be placed under strict supervision and required to undergo rigorous training. If you pass, you may earn a position in our elite pilot program. The announcement stunned everyone present. Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by hushed whispers. Laura blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. Are you serious? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Deadly serious, General Hayes replied. But let me be clear. This is not a reward. It's a test. Fail, and you'll face the full weight of the law. Succeed, and you might just carve out a place for yourself here. Laura nodded slowly, her mind racing. This was more than she had hoped for. It wasn't forgiveness, it was a challenge, and challenges were something she thrived on. Over the next few weeks, Laura threw herself into the training program with everything she had. Each day was grueling, filled with physical conditioning, classroom instruction, and hours spent in simulators. The instructors pushed her hard, testing not only her technical skills but also her mental resilience. They wanted to see if she could handle the pressure of being a fighter pilot, where split-second decisions could mean life or death. Marcus was assigned to oversee part of her training, much to both their surprise. At first, their interactions were tense. Marcus struggled to reconcile his initial judgment of Laura with the reality of her abilities. Laura, meanwhile, enjoyed watching him squirm, teasing him whenever she got the chance. But as the days passed, their relationship began to shift. Slowly, begrudgingly, they developed a mutual respect. One evening, after a particularly intense session in the simulator, Marcus approached Laura as she sat reviewing her performance data. You're improving, he said simply, leaning against the doorway. Thanks, Laura replied, looking up at him. Though I'm guessing that's not easy for you to admit. Marcus chuckled softly, shaking his head. No, it's not. But credit where it's due. You're good. Really good. Laura smiled faintly, pleased by the rare compliment. Does this mean we're calling a truce? Marcus shrugged. Let's just say I'm starting to see things differently. You've earned my respect whether I like it or not. Their conversation marked a turning point in their dynamic. From that day forward, Marcus became not just a supervisor but a mentor, offering guidance and advice as Laura navigated the demanding world of military aviation. In return, Laura proved herself time and again, showing not only skill but dedication and discipline. As the weeks turned into months, Laura's progress became impossible to ignore. She aced every test, excelled in every drill, and earned the admiration of her peers. Even those who had initially dismissed her came to recognize her talent and determination. By the end of the program, there was no doubt in anyone's mind. Laura Carter belonged in the sky. When graduation day arrived, Laura stood alongside her fellow trainees, wearing the uniform of an official pilot for the first time. It fit perfectly, both literally and metaphorically. As she gazed out at the crowd gathered to celebrate their achievements, She spotted Marcus standing near the front, his arms crossed but a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Catching her eye, he gave her a subtle nod, a silent acknowledgement of how far she had come. Laura returned the gesture, feeling a surge of pride and gratitude. She had started this journey to prove a point, but along the way she had discovered something even more valuable: her own strength. She had faced judgment, defied expectations, and risen above it all. Now, as she prepared to take her place among the best of the best, she knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning. Graduation day was a blur of excitement and nerves for Laura. The ceremony took place on the airbase runway, with rows of folding chairs set up beneath a clear blue sky. Pilots, instructors, and military officials filled the seats, their faces serious yet proud. Laura stood alongside her fellow graduates, her heart pounding as she waited for her name to be called. When it finally came, she stepped forward to receive her wings, a small but powerful symbol of everything she had worked so hard to achieve. As she pinned the insignia to her uniform, Laura felt a wave of emotion wash over her. This moment wasn't just about personal triumph. It was about proving that talent mattered more than appearances. She glanced at the crowd, searching for familiar faces. Marcus was there, his expression stoic but approving. Alex sat a few rows back, giving her a thumbs up when their eyes met. Even General Hayes nodded in acknowledgement, his earlier skepticism replaced by quiet admiration. For the first time in a long while, Laura felt like she truly belonged. Days that followed were a whirlwind of new responsibilities. Laura was assigned to a squadron stationed at the same base where she had once sneaked in under cover of darkness. Her teammates were seasoned pilots, each with years of experience under their belts. At first, they treated her with cautious curiosity, unsure what to make of the woman who had earned her place through such unconventional means. But Laura didn't let their hesitation bother her. She knew actions spoke louder than words, and she was determined to prove herself all over again. Her first mission came sooner than expected. It was a routine patrol, designed to test her ability to work within a team and follow orders without question. Laura climbed into the cockpit of an F-35, her hands steady on the controls. As the engine roared to life, she felt a surge of exhilaration, mixed with nerves. This wasn't a training exercise, it was the real thing. Lives depended on her performance. The flight went smoothly, with Laura seamlessly integrating into the formation. She communicated clearly with her teammates, executed maneuvers flawlessly, and maintained constant awareness of her surroundings. By the time they returned to base, her squadron leader, Captain Ryan, pulled her aside for a private word. "You did well out there," he said, his tone gruff but sincere. "Keep it up and you'll go far." Laura smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment settle over her. She had earned not only her wings but also the trust of those around her. Over time, her presence in the squadron became less remarkable, not because she faded into the background but because she proved herself capable day after day. Her confidence grew, as did her reputation among her peers. But Laura's journey wasn't without its challenges. Some members of the military community still viewed her with suspicion, whispering behind her back about how she had gotten her start. Rumors spread about favoritism or special treatment, despite evidence to the contrary. Laura heard the gossip, of course, but she refused to let it affect her. Instead, she focused on her work, letting her actions silence the doubters. One evening, during a debriefing session after a particularly intense training exercise, Marcus approached Laura. They hadn't spoken much since graduation, both busy with their respective duties. But tonight, Marcus seemed unusually thoughtful. "How's it going?" he asked, leaning against the wall of the briefing room. "Good," Laura replied, glancing up from her notes. "Still learning, but I'm getting the hang of things." Marcus nodded. "I noticed. You've come a long way since that night." Laura smirked, raising an eyebrow. "Are you saying you're impressed?" "I'm saying you've earned it," Marcus corrected, though there was a hint of amusement in his voice. Not many people could have pulled off what you did, or handled the consequences as well as you have. Thanks, Laura said softly, genuinely touched by his words. That means a lot coming from you. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Marcus straightened, clearing his throat. Listen, I wanted to apologize for how I treated you back at the airfield. I was wrong to judge you based on your appearance. You deserved better. Laura studied him for a moment, then shrugged lightly. Apology accepted, but honestly, if you hadn't kicked me out that day, I might never have pushed myself this hard. So maybe we're even. Marcus chuckled, shaking his head. Fair enough. Their conversation marked another turning point in their relationship. What had started as animosity had evolved into mutual respect, and perhaps even friendship. They continued to work together occasionally, sharing advice and insights that benefited them both. Laura appreciated having someone like Marcus in her corner, someone who understood the pressures of being a pilot and could offer guidance when needed. As months turned into years, Laura established herself as one of the top pilots in her squadron. Her skills improved with every mission, and her leadership qualities began to shine. She mentored newer recruits, passing on the lessons she had learned along the way. Her story became a source of inspiration for others, proof that determination and talent could overcome prejudice and doubt. Eventually, Laura was promoted to a leadership position within her squadron. It was a role she embraced wholeheartedly, using her experience to guide and support her teammates. She remained humble, always remembering where she had started and how far she had come. Her father would have been proud, she thought often, imagining the stories he would tell about his daughter flying fighter jets. One day, during a rare break between missions, Laura found herself standing on the edge of the runway, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in hues of orange and purple, a breathtaking sight that reminded her why she loved flying so much. Behind her, footsteps echoed on the pavement. Turning, she saw Marcus approaching, his hands tucked into his pockets. Beautiful. Sunset? He remarked, stopping beside her. It is, Laura agreed, smiling faintly. Makes you remember why we do what we do. Marcus nodded, gazing out at the horizon. You've changed a lot since I first met you, he said after a pause. And not just in terms of skill. You've grown into someone I admire. Laura laughed softly. Careful, Marcus, that almost sounds like a compliment. It is, he replied, meeting her gaze. You've earned it. They stood there for a while longer side by side, enjoying the quiet moment. Neither of them needed to say anything more. They had come a long way, from adversaries to allies, from judgment to understanding. And though their paths might diverge in the future, they would always share a bond forged in the skies. For Laura, life had become exactly what she had dreamed of: freedom, challenge, and purpose. She had proven herself not just to Marcus, not just to the aviation community, but to herself. No matter where her journey took her next, she knew one thing for certain: she belonged in the sky,